Thomas Green here with Ethical Marketing Service. On the episode today, we have Alain Dumonceaux. Alan, welcome.
Thomas, thanks for having me on the show today. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
It is very much my pleasure. Would you like to take a moment and tell the audience a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, my name is Alain Dumonceaux. I'm the founder of the Awakened Man movement. I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and I started doing men's work probably just prior to the pandemic in late 2020 or 2019, I should say. And I did that because I found that there was a void in the marketplace for a place for men to go where they can feel safe, to be able to talk about the challenges that they're faced with. And I faced two incredible challenges in the previous few years of that. And that was one, my second marriage just about dissolved due to some issues on my part. And right on the cusp of that as well, my father-in-law had passed away, and I had found him in that when he had passed, and he was really, really close to me, really dear friend. And in these two instances, I found that there was just nowhere for me to go to work through the grieving process. Yes, are there grief counselors in that? Absolutely, and I did that bit of that work. But I found there wasn't the same type of support for men to really be able to feel comfortable enough to go through and work through the challenges they were faced with. And so when I recognized that, I decided to start doing some men's work and looked at the different formats and what folks are doing, and put together a program called the Band of Brothers. That's a group mentorship program that I host. We meet on a monthly basis, and then I also offer a one-on-one coaching. I call it the Hero's Quest. Where we really dive deep into the different pillars of life that we face, and really work at raising the level that we show up as husbands and fathers and leaders. And so that's a little bit about how I got into doing this work here, in the last little while.
Thank you for the introduction. And it's a very interesting point, and it's not something that I've thought about before. You mentioned that men don't have the support, generally speaking. Would you say it's your contention that women have the support in sort of peer group or family? Is that accurate to say?
Yeah, I'd say the reason for that's twofold. One is that, first off, women are much more open to talking about and working through problems. And so when you look at the statistics of those who are attending courses in self-development, the room is pretty much filled with women, very few men. And men tend to we do that because we haven't really learned, we were never taught how to be able to share emotion. Remember, I'm in my mid or so 50s. And so the era that I came from is that, children to be seen and not heard, boys don't cry. We need to really have this, keep all our emotions inside. It wasn't good to be able to express your emotions. And so because of that, and the societal pressures, you got to suck it up if you're in sports, and the hard nosed type of raising that we encountered, we just didn't know how to do that. It's not that there aren't programs out there, but there are no programs that are specifically dedicated to men who can come in an environment and be able to work through some of the challenges, whether that's going through a grieving process, you're having personal issues with maybe your relationships are stagnated, or your career is just not as fulfilling as before. And so we tend to have this mindset, this idea as men that we need to be this lone wolf. Well, I'll figure it out myself. And there's some sort of shame or weakness if we reach out and we ask for help. And the truth of the matter is that's the absolute opposite, because our families and our communities are looking for us to stand up and take leadership roles. And I think it's just a matter of men understanding, recognize that. And I see that change happening more and more today as our more and more men's work groups here in North America and what we're doing. And I think that's part of the reason why it just hasn't been as prevalent as you would see from with women.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. You mentioned perhaps a grieving issue, relationships, and what were the other things where men perhaps lack support?
Yeah, for sure. And when they're looking at their, it's not just from a grieving and that, also just from a personal perspective. So we all have goals and dreams, we have aspirations, and so we were looking for fulfillment. And a lot of times for men, we find our fulfillment in a career. And what I'm finding, especially in my life and in the work that I do with men, is that when we look for fulfillment in the things that we do, we forget or we don't pay attention to the thing, to the part of who we are. And so I always say that men are ready for change and ready to do the work when they can take responsibility for where they are. Our life is exactly where it is based on the actions and decisions that we've made in our past and we continue to make. For who we are that person that decided each and every day that this is what my actions and my habits are. And then who do we aspire to become? The part about being, and getting men to focus more on being present, being strong, being powerful. And that those are sometimes some words that may trigger folks. But what I'm really talking about is really about us having a sense of self-confidence that we know what our true purpose is. We know what life is about for us. And then we take action steps, purposeful action steps every day to ensure that we're moving forward.
Fascinating answer, and you touched on a couple of my favorite questions. So I'll throw you a curveball and
Yeah.
say, if someone was to ask you, Alan, who are you? What would you say?
Yeah. I would say that I'm a purposeful action mentor. And what I mean by that, not just for others, but for myself, and that in each and every moment, I assess the action and the thoughts that I'm taking. Are they in alignment with who I say that I am? And so I'm a person who likes to live in integrity. And integrity means being in alignment with everything from thoughts, words, and actions. And I believe that that is the key of what success is. So when you ask that question about who am I, is it that I'm someone who lives with purposeful intention.
Interesting. And the other thing you touched upon was about life's purpose. Um, I love asking about this topic because I don't really feel like I feel like I've touched on it myself, but I don't really feel like I have a great answer to this question. So if someone is trying to figure out what their life's purpose is, how would you answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the first things that we do with men as part of our onboarding process is that in order to really to understand what our purpose is, it's more than just making a platitude or a statement. Our purpose is something that comes deep from within. And so, in order to answer that question, we first have to look at what are the things that we say that we value that are important in our lives. And so we go through an exercise where I get men to come up with I give them a list of about 112, 100 to 15 different adjectives that would describe values. And after they've gone through a process of making a few columns, distilling it down to 5 words, and I ask them to write a statement of worth that value that would resonate across those 5 important values. Once they do that, then I ask them, all right, now I would like you to do an alignment assessment. How are you living to that statement? And what we find is that what we say that we value in our actions are two very different things. And so we start to then to understand that, well, now if I really feel that this statement that I've made is really a purpose statement, it's the thing of how I define myself. If I'm living out of alignment, then I'm truly not living a purposeful life. So it's not about that I'm going to be the president of the United States, or I'm going to be the best baseball player, or whatever you may have thought of as a purpose, as young men. But it's really about a place of being. And so once we start doing that assessment, then we start to look at what are the beliefs that are surrounding that? Why are we not living those values? What is preventing us from? And that's really getting into self-sabotage and some of the sabotaging behaviors that we're displaying. And so then we start to unpack that. And so what's the statement of belief about what you believe about yourself when it comes to this value? You say that you value family, but you work 80 hours a week. And so if you're working 80 hours a week, not that that's necessarily wrong, it's just how are you now supporting this value that family is so important? And so when we start to look at our actions and how we're showing up, then we can start to shift our alignment and getting more into alignment with what our value statement is. And so then we start to get really close to living our purpose, because ultimately your purpose statement will reflect something about how you want to live, how you want to be, and then you take steps and actions that fulfill that. And so when we talk about purpose here at the Awakened Man, that's really what we're talking about. It's about being in a place of conscious awareness of exactly what our actions are taking each and every moment.
I love the answer. And you touched on something which was going to be my next question. And you covered a couple of the instances. My next question was going to be why is it that people don't live in line with what their values are? My interpretation is that, people aren't aware. So on the one hand, they value family, but they're working 80 hours a week. And on the other hand, it might be just something that they're self-sabotaging in your
Mm.
words. So what would you say are the main reasons that in relation to that topic?
Why they're not living in alignment?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not living in alignment because we truly are not consciously aware of the actions that we're taking. And so what ends up by happening is that you could still be that guy that works 80 hours a week. I'm not saying that you should have I want to go get into, life balance here, this work-life balance idea. Work-life balance is a teeter-totter, right? It doesn't mean that it's always going to be level. At some points in our lives, one is going to take more precedent than the others. As we get a little bit older now, we're seeing it very popular that we're now starting to take care of our parents, right? And so now family starts to take a little bit more time for us. Now, does that mean that we should forget about our careers and our businesses and that? No, what it means is that the place that we put our value and our energy, we still need to be aware. Kind of like the Stephen Covey model, we think when he talks about the end in mind and how he structured that and making sure that the key things in each and every that are important to us that we touch on those each and every week. And so the reason why we get out of alignment is that we get stuck into doing mode. Because men, we're really good at that. We're doers, we're fixers. We want to solve the problem. So we spend all of our time focused on do, 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 do. But when we can take that moment to actually plot into our schedules, our weekly schedules, a reminder of how we can be more this week, then we can start to get back into alignment. And I think what I found in my work, and it was especially for me, is that when I've done that, then everything around me works much better, works more in sync. I can still spend a longer day in my career and know that my family is supportive of that because I'm also conscious. They know I'm consciously aware that when I'm home, I'm truly home. I'm not on the phone, I'm not answering email, I'm not doing other things. I'm present for them. And that's really the key. And it's really about it. It's almost mechanical, but that's how guys work. And I think it works well for us is that to plot that as a reminder for ourselves to what are truly the important things. It's so easy to get up every day, follow your typical routine, and then wonder why your health isn't improving, our career isn't improving, our relationships aren't improving. But really, when we look at what our daily actions are, we're not taking any steps forward to improving any of those things. And so when we bring it to the forefront and we actually put some energy behind it, then we can get more into alignment. And it doesn't mean that every day is perfect, but they're much better than they were when we're not consciously aware.
Yeah, making progress as well. I like that. So I asked the "Who are you?" question so that we can have an example. What's your life's purpose?
Yeah, my life's purpose is guiding men to find the true greatness that resides within. Because I believe that as men rise up to become better fathers, husbands, and leaders, so do our families rise up and become better in their communities. And as our communities improve, then the larger places, the city centers, the centers we live in, ultimately our world becomes a better place. But it starts with us. So my purpose is really being that purposeful action mentor to help guide men towards living lives of fulfillment for themselves, their families, and their communities.
I love the answer. Does make me think. Although you sort of highlighted a problem, you then went on and wanted to help others with it. Is there a reason why for you why that was so important?
Yeah, for me, it was during the darkest days of my life in my period where there was nobody that I could reach out to. And let me paraphrase that. I have a couple of very close friends, and try as they might to be able to support me, they didn't know how to support me. And it just broke my heart to go through that and to know that other men struggle. I'm also the father of a son who struggles with making healthy choices around drugs and alcohol, and is in and out of incarceration all the time. He's currently incarcerated at this recording, and I've had to learn to be able to be present for him, to love him enough, but to also give him the space to live his life. And when I think about the challenges that I've faced in my life, that I'm not the only person, the only man that has faced this. And I see too much in my work, people struggling, especially now coming back from the pandemic. The world is so different. The mental health strain for folks is so much more challenging today. And maybe it's part because I'm more conscious because of things that have happened in my life. And I also think it's also other folks are struggling more so as well. And so somebody needs to step up and do something. And so there's a saying that goes, if it's got to be, it's up to me. And so I made the decision to do something about it, and ideally one day that hopefully we can change the lives of hundreds of thousands of families and communities around the world, to be able to live lives more fulfilling, have fathers that are present, have leaders that care enough to understand how to be servants while still leading their organizations, the businesses, the things that they're involved in, the charity work that they do. And so I think that's, if I was to look at why I got into it, that was really the catalyst, is to make sure that no man, no family, no community ever suffers anymore because somebody is too afraid to step forward.
Thank you for sharing that. It's a great answer. And I feel like you probably have some experience that, should we say, parents may appreciate. In the instance of, should we say, older children or young adults where they're encountering drugs and alcohol and this type of thing, the initial reaction is somewhat default, meaning they haven't given it a lot of thought about how they would deal with it. So my question is there a wrong way to deal with it?
That's a great question. I would suggest that the wrong way to deal with it, in my opinion, obviously it's my opinion, is to own more of your part of what's going on in your son or daughter's life than you need to be. And as parents, it's easy for us, especially in the beginning, to feel such immense guilt over what could I have done better or different. How could I have prevented this from happening? And yes, those are things that all of us could have done. When I'm talking, to be completely vulnerable and open, I could have been a much better father. My two sons are in there. The eldest one is the one that's struggling right now immensely. He's 33, 34 this year. My youngest one is 30. When his mother and I separated, because I had married my high school sweetheart, he was 5 and his brother was 2. And I don't know and so there was a long time, and even to this day, at times I question how much of an impact that separation had, even though there was other individuals in their lives. And I look at, as that separation happened, how much of a state of depression I was in. And I didn't have the energy, the strength to be able to spend enough time with them. And so I hardly saw them, once every month, maybe 2 months, because I was embarrassed, going through depression. Today, I recognize it as really a depressive state. And back then it was a lot of excuses, because in the end, they didn't care about where dad lived, the 500 square foot bachelor suite. They just cared that they were spending time with dad. And so if there's going to be a mistake that we're going to make, it's going to be one owning more than our share, meaning we can't prevent them from making their life choices. They need to live their life. And in order to be able to rectify that is to be able to then explain to them that you love them unconditionally. You'll be there to support them, but you can't support the decisions they make. And so my son and I have an understanding that I am here whenever he needs me, and as soon as he needs me. That that I'll be there to help him. And as long as he continues to make unhealthy choices, I just can't support that. And so that puts tension in our relationship. But for my health, it keeps me in a place that's safe because I have other children to support. I have there's other people. And I think as parents and as fathers, we have to remind ourselves that so much energy can go into that one individual that we forget about the rest of the family. And many families end up in divorce because of how we're handling the situation and how so much energy is going to this one challenge that the families faces, this crisis, and we forget about the rest of
Mm.
the people, the players in that game. And so I think it's important that we recognize our part in it and stay within that boundary and that framework. And that's really hard work to do, Thomas. It's not. I'm saying it like maybe it sounds easy. It's not. Even to this day, it's still a struggle for me. But it's a reminder that in order for me to be the best that I can be for him, for my wife, for his mom, for his brother, that I need to take care of me as best that I can so that I can show up the best for them.
Thank you for the answer. And it reminds me of a Jim Rohn quote. It goes, if I'm not mistaken, I'll take care of me for you, and you take care of you for me. It
Yeah, that's
immediately
good.
popped up into my head. But thank you again, and it's a segue into one of the interesting things that I think that you talk about, which is winning your wife back. Have you got thoughts about that particular topic?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I was just saying, alluding earlier on, I was, part of the challenge that I went through is that I just about lost my second marriage, be honest, because of infidelity on my part. And the challenge in that is that I had already in my early 30s, I had lost had filed for bankruptcy and divorce and everything with my first wife. And so I started a journey of, self-help. It's really, I hadn't even read a book until I was 30. Quite honestly, I barely read anything in school. And I just dove into all this self-help stuff, and it took some training and became certified in NLP and timeline therapy and emotional intelligence. But what I found out, well, actually, my wife pointed it out to me, is that you have all this training, Al, all this stuff, but you're not doing anything with it. You're not living it. And so when the infidelity happened, she gave me an opportunity to be able to become the man that she saw that I was yet to find. And so in order for me to be able to win my wife back, it was about me taking responsibility. Again, going back to those three pieces. That's really where I came up with that framework. I take responsibility for where I'm at. Well, how did I get here? I got here by really living out of alignment, not truly living my values, saying that I had these values, but not moving forward with any of it. And so as I started to do that work and recognize that none of this, while she has her part to own in the relationship, what ended up happening was not her fault, not on her. That was on me. She didn't ask me to make that choice. I decided to make that choice. And so the moment that I started to take responsibility for that, then things started to work. And so part of winning your wife back is that as men, we have to truly own all of it, all of that part. If you're in a situation where I was similarly, it's up to us to do all of the work. It's not up to her. And so what ended up happening is part of that is that when we recognize as a couple is that we didn't know how to have conversations. We didn't know how to talk about the hard stuff. And so it gave an opportunity for us to practice that. And so I would consider myself at the time prior to that being a people pleaser. And other guys will think of it, the term as being a doormat, where we would just acquiesce and give everything. Well, whatever my wife wants, yeah, whatever you want to do. Or if she shot back and challenged you, my old favorite saying used to be, "Is this going to matter in a year from now?" So I don't want to fight about it. Or is this the hill that I want to die on? So I don't want to fight about it. But what ends up happening in those kinds of relationships is that we're truly not being engaged. So part of winning my wife back was letting her know that I was going to be somebody different, that I was going to be, and someone who had a backbone, that had opinions, that had an idea of who he is as a man. Because until then, she saw this facade, whatever I would let her see. And so the winning your wife back part is being completely and openly and as vulnerable as I can. And it went everything from allowing her, even to this day, every aspect. There is no secret between us. She wants my phone, she can look at my phone. She wants to check my email, she can check my email. Now, those are all parts and parcels of us growing, because part of the winning your wife back is the relationship that was there is now dead. Everything has to die. And we are the first ones to die in terms of who we are as men. Then the relationship starts to shift and it dies. The old relationship dies because she recognizes now that, yeah, how she's showing up has to change. Because guess what? She was used to the old guy. She was used to the old Alan that wouldn't hardly say anything, wouldn't do anything. And so when that happens, then you start to rebuild something more powerful. Think of it as whenever you break a bone. When it heals, it's stronger in that place. This is what happens in our relationships. Now, does this mean that it's going to work out for everyone? Maybe, maybe not, because both players have to be willing to do the work. And I can guarantee you, to this day, if you ask my wife, had I not done the work and continued to do the work today, she would not be here. And rightfully so. She wouldn't stay here. And so this isn't just because she said she's given me the opportunity to showcase who I am, to really reveal to myself first the man that I claim to be. In any given moment, she could have just said, hey, this is just too hard. I thought I could do this work and I could leave. And that doesn't mean I should stop doing my work. If anything, it means I should double down on that work. But I've been blessed because she's a woman of conviction, always has been. It's what I was attracted to. She knows what she wants. And it's why today we have a stronger foundation than we did when we first met, because we're not the same people. And so I really credit that to her being the catalyst and for the two of us to really do that work. And I think, hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can win your wife back. There's lots of stuff. I have a module on it, on really looking at, some of the other stuff, attachment style, the theories and that kind of thing, to get a sense of how we show up in relationship.
Thank you. I think that's great. One thing which I wanted to follow up on was about the fact that you mentioned sort of telling the truth and, speaking your mind or sharing your opinions, for example, instead of just being a people pleaser, as you said. I think some people do that as a way of avoiding conflict. And I have noticed sometimes it is easier to, should we say, not have the conversation that you deem to be not that important, instead of, just being transparent about it, just due to the conflict that arises. So, and I think you touched upon the fact that you need to some degree, learn how to talk to each other. Have you got any thoughts about if someone were to make that change and there was conflict arising, what they should do?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you that one of the things that we did is we started to work on being able to have conversations, crucial conversations, is to ensure that we set the stage for what's happening. And so what I mean by that is that because we're not used to doing that as men, we're going to, and women as well, but I focus on men's work, is because we're not used to having these conversations, it's going to be really messy in the beginning. And so our conversation, and then it still happens to this day, is that I will say to my wife, something's been bothering me. It's been on my mind. I really want to talk about it. I'm just not sure if it's going to come out great. So if you're willing to participate with me, play with me a little bit with this, and allow me to share what I have in my mind, it would really help. It would really help me work through this. She's always like, yeah, absolutely, let's do that. And then we just get into talking about what's important for me, what is on my mind. And as we become better at that, and so in the beginning, like I said, my wife's very purposefully driven. She knows what she wants. In some aspects, her tendencies tend to be a little bit more lean more on the masculine side. So she will be a bit more abrasive at times, when the energy is high, emotions are sharp. And so we've learned to play on that. And so when those interactions were happening, then I would say, okay, and her name's Kim. I'd say, Kim, this is why I want, in the past, I would shut down because you're saying you want me to be open with you and have a conversation, but you're really not interested in hearing what I have to say. You want to tell me what's important for you. Oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. And so then we can get back on track and have that conversation, and vice versa. That would happen depending on who's leading that conversation. And so it's really about being able to raise the level of intimacy for us. I came across this 5-step, this 5 levels of intimacy, and I really put it into communication mindset. And it's about being able for us to be the most vulnerable is really being able to share what our needs are. Because guess what we're doing as men, as anyone, we're putting our heart out on the table. We're saying, here is what I need in this relationship. And in any given moment, it can be crushed. And that's why we want to avoid conflict. So we'd rather share other people's opinions, other people's ideas. Because when I say, well, I was talking with Thomas and Thomas said this, and I really agree with that. But then it also gives me the out, because that's Thomas's idea. I agree with it, but I still have an out. But when I say the exact same thing, but this is what I need, there's no backing out now. And I'm totally vulnerable. And I encourage men when they start to practice this is to don't take the biggest subject on the table. Maybe take something a little bit smaller. Maybe take something doing the dishes or taking the garbage out, or something where you can practice, where it doesn't end up by being a massive blowout where both of you are out of control and you can't manage that situation. You got to build into these things. We crawled before we walked, before we ran. Same thing happens in communication and how we work towards getting better at being communicators.
Thank you for that. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. I particularly like setting the stage because I feel like a lot of problems in relationships come from communication issues. Whereas if you're sort of setting expectations in advance, I think that sort of thing can be avoided, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's where all of us make a mistake, right? We assume we know what the other person expectations are, but they don't have a hot clue. And if we don't spell it out, because we may think that this is what we want as an outcome for that conversation, and maybe you'll have time to plan out, hey, what's my outcome? I need to talk to my wife about something. I need to talk to my wife about raising the kids, how we raise the kids, how we discipline. So you may want to take some time to think about what's the desired outcome for that before getting into it right off the bat. And then when you recognize the outcome, is it an outcome that serves all parties involved, or is this more self-serving? Sometimes that may make sense that, when it comes to child rearing, you're somebody that works lots, you have a busy business. Maybe coming home, walking right through the door in the first 5 minutes is not the best time for dad to be associating, getting ready to jump in and doing stuff. Maybe he needs 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is to settle into his role as father. But you set these expectations, that framework out, and you know what the outcome is. Because the outcome isn't about taking that time off. The outcome is about being the best, showing up as the best husband and father in that moment. And how can we have a conversation about that? And then it's a different topic. Instead of saying, look, I just need half an hour when I get home. Okay, what's that all about? And because when we say something like that, we're assuming that she gets it, that I've worked hard all day and that I need this break. Well, so has she. So having a deeper conversation about it really helps everyone to get on the same page and get into alignment again of what the purpose of the conversation is about and how it supports the family unit as a whole. So that hopefully is an example to really put some context around it.
Yeah, it's a great example. And I've loved the topics we've talked about. It's a slight change of pace, but I just wanted to ask you about it before, just because it's an area of expertise for yourself, and it is imposter syndrome. So, have
Yeah.
you got any thoughts about that topic?
Yeah, you know what? In my early 20s, I was blessed to be to work with a chef mentor who was on a culinary team, and so I was a sports person for him. Preparing some doing what we call it mise en place in the kitchen. It means translated literally means putting things in its place so that the final execution can occur. And then I got I was really fortunate that I got chosen to be on our local culinary team, and I competed in the World Culinary Olympics in Frankfurt in 2000. No, sorry, 1992. Oh, am I dating myself? And won a couple of silver medals. But I have to tell you that entire experience, I relate it to a hockey analogy. There's the star players, there's the first line, and then there's the guys that are the third and fourth liners, or the grinders, and they're doing more of the hard, dirty stuff. I felt that I was that player on this team. The talent around me was phenomenal. And so, what an imposter syndrome really is it's a feeling or an inability for us to really assess ourselves fairly. And so, we're always in a constant comparison mode. And whenever we're in that mode, not very often are we better than, we ever see ourselves better than or equal to. We always see ourselves less. And it's not just a little bit less, it's a lot less. And so we start to do things like berate ourselves and how we compensate for that. While the mind, the mental chatter, it can be really rude and disruptive. How it'll show up is we'll become overachievers. And so that's what's happening with me. While I performed well at the Olympics, in my career at the time as a chef, I was truly an overachiever. I needed to be the best at managing an operation, driving revenue, doing anything, all the business metrics, being the best leader that I could. And so when you start doing that, guess what ends up by happening? Well, the other side of that teeter-totter is self-doubt. So there were moments of when I've had lots of confidence and many more moments of self-doubt because of the berating. And so it becomes challenging for us. And that's where as I look back at my work, today's work, it's when I started to recognize this self-sabotage, some of the things I get to a point of, I never competed after the 92 Olympics. I had plenty of career time, runway to do more competitions, but the imposter syndrome of feeling inadequate, feeling, how am I even here? And instead of enjoying the moment, being grateful for the moment like I am today, to be able to be chosen to work alongside some amazing, amazing talent and to learn from some of the best minds. And so we tend to do that when we're in the middle of it. And so I find that some of the best things that we can do about the imposter syndrome and overcoming it is really to talk about what it is we're doing today, how it is affecting us. And so, like I said, some of the things can really show up in how we're as overachievers. It could be a sign that there's some imposter syndrome. Maybe we're fighting that because, our fathers said that we needed to be something. A lot of parents live through their children, right? You need to be a lawyer. You need to be this. And so we do these things and we don't really feel like that's who we are. And so we live in this false identity. And when we recognize that that's what's happening, then we can become more true to who we are. Maybe you can still be a great lawyer or a great chef or whatever it is that you're choosing, but you come at it now from a place of gratitude and grace versus trying to fill this void that'll never fill. It's an endless black hole. So that's a bit of my thoughts on the imposter syndrome.
Some pretty good thoughts there. And yeah, lots to take away if someone does meet that criteria. Is there anything that I should have asked you about today?
Yeah, no, we touched a lot of great stuff. I just, if I was to say anything, I think the challenge I think I have for men faced today is that we really have to pay attention to how we're showing up. It's never been more difficult to be a man today. The idea of what masculinity is changing, and I think for a lot of us, we feel a lot of pain in our lives, and the pain is because we have a pain of loneliness and a pain of loneliness and separation. And then usually that's going to be masked because of anger and resentment. And when we can recognize that our lives are made up by our thoughts and our actions, that we can change what happens to us and how our lives show up. And so when folks are ready to make that change, not only will your life improve, but so will be all the lives around that you touch. And so I encourage men to do this work. It's such important work. And we need to take back who we are as men. Stop allowing society to tell us what masculinity looks like, who you are, own who you are, be the best version of that in each and every day.
And if people want to get in touch with you or follow you, where do they go?
Yeah, best place to go is to go to my website, theawakendman.net. And you go to the website, there'll be a pop-up. Right now, I have a little workbook there. It's called Setting the Compass. It's a great opportunity for you to look at. Now, it's only going to assess the year of 2023 and the upcoming year 2024, but even just taking the last 12 months. What were the last 12 months like for your life? And how would you like the next 12 months to look? And I encourage you to go to the website, download that. It's a free little exercise workbook for you folks to go through and really help to get themselves in alignment with who they are and who they claim to be.
And any closing thoughts for us today?
Now, I just want to say, Thomas, I really enjoyed this conversation. You had some powerful questions, and hopefully we've been able to provide some value for your audience. And if there's ever opportunity for us to be able to connect and do work together, I'd be more than happy to do that with you, my friend.
Well, you've been a great guest, given some great information, so I appreciate that. Alan, thank you very much.